Good morning. It's an honor to be here again to give you a few minutes of my thoughts about where the industry is headed. Today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about cloud, but we're going to talk about it in the context of whether it's a revolution or an evolution. And it's interesting. When you think of, there's a couple guys out there that are pretty smart guys, or one who's no longer with us, but if you look on the left, Larry Ellison would make the argument that cloud is really just something that's happening. It's an evolution of where we are, and we're just continuing on a path that we've been on for many, many years. And he would talk about cloud technologies and say, okay, this is something, it's not new. In fact, why even talk about it? Jobs, on the other hand, would say this is going to change our lives completely, and it's going to be a very, very important shift in terms of how we think and how we operate as people in the IT sector. I actually will, over the next few minutes, agree with Steve Jobs. And the reason I would tell you this is the facts tend to lead us that we're heading in a different direction. First, I believe big data is getting bigger. And one of the things as I walk around this conference and you look at the transactions that are being done, today we're actually not just selling small transport, we're actually selling large transport, large transactions. For example, we never used to talk about 100 Gs or terabits being sold at a time. And the reality is that these types of deals are actually happening in this room around here right now. And we've actually moved. Big data is actually here, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's going to have some very, very profound impact on us. One of the things also is telecom service providers are a race to keep up with the digital transformation. Things are changing very quickly. If you look around, data centers are feeling the pinch for the first time. If you look around the industry, there's 12 data center companies right now that are up for sale. Reality is it's really changing. It's very, very disruptive in that space, and there's a huge changes happening there. And finally, the industry is really trying to figure out where and how to focus to maximize and leverage our assets. And one of the things is, where do we go in the next 5 years? Because if you start to look at the trends, how do we invest to actually be competitive? If we're a global operator, how do we actually compete in this space and actually spend the money to actually be an operator? And I've talked to this group for many, many years over the last 5 to 7 years. And I would tell you this year is very different because as you start to look out onto the horizon, you've got to be very, very focused as to what you're going to do next. I want to talk, and one of the things that I think is important, and this is just one of the things that we were looking at, if I take out the desktop, if all of you in this room were actually to pull your desktop out and say, what do I have on my desk today? Typically, you have one processor, you have about 8 gigs of memory, and you got 100 gigs of storage. That's what you're actually operating with. If you then take that computer and said, okay, what can I buy with that same amount of money in the cloud? You'd actually get to, essentially, you could have 4 processors, you'd have 55 times the speed, you'd have 600 gigs of memory, and you'd have 12 exabytes of storage. So if you look at just the efficiency of cloud, it's very, very profound. And if you start thinking about what does this mean just for you as a user and every user, this is what you can transform from what you're doing today to what you could do tomorrow. So today we'll talk about observations on the impact of the cloud. We'll talk about what operators need to do to succeed. And then we'll talk about what I call the key investment strategies, not just as operators, but as investors. Where do you need to actually put your money as a company if you want to be successful? And then some final thoughts. One of the things is, if you look at one of the big profound changes, it's interesting, last night I was actually finishing up this presentation, and the interesting thing was